Welcome. This is the British Gliding Association Flight Radio Telephony Operators License course. This is part one. This is the third time we've run it. This course is the result of a project which was largely designed to make glider pilots better at using the radio. That was our prime objective. We wanted to teach glider pilots what to do to use the radio, not power pilots like mostly happens. And we wanted to provide a comprehensive course because unlike most power pilots learning to fly, using the radio isn't usually much of a part of a glider pilot's training. So many of you guys will be coming to this completely fresh. Additionally, we wanted to make it easier, so reduce barriers to glider pilots getting a FRTOL, which is how we pronounce that acronym. And there are two ways that we want to try and achieve that. One was by producing a more appropriate test. We were hoping to be able to do a Zoom-based test based on a glider flight. We managed that last year. We'll be doing a face-to-face test this year. And we wanted to reduce the cost somewhat. So this course is free, which is good. A little bit about who we are, the three people who've been running this course. This is the third year that we've done it. I'm a full cadet at Cambridge. I'm also a power pilot, and I have an instrument rating, and I have as well as a Shark at Cambridge. I have a share in a Mooney, Shark at Cambridge Gliding Club. I have a share in a Mooney at Cambridge Airfield, and I fly that to take me around Europe on occasion. Chula Rupasena is on the call. He's at London Gliding Club, and he is an actual RT examiner. We've got a few of those on this call. You'll come across them later. And Andrew Watson, again Cambridge, and he's a full cat there, and he's also taught in the States. If you want to communicate with us at the moment, you can use the chat. I suggest you push those messages towards Andrew, who you should be able to call, should be able to get hold of, because I'm giving a presentation, so I won't be reading the chat messages. Andrew can do the chat to ask any questions later.
Paul, can I suggest, sorry to put Chula on the hot seat, if we can send to Chula, because I'm busy trying to assign...
excellent idea. Chula, you're it for the chat messages then.
Thanks.
Fine. Okay, so you ought to get, let me just check I've enabled that for you. Yeah, you should be able to get messages. So any questions, send them to Chula. We've got a lot of people on the call, so we can't do it by people interrupting. If you can keep yourself muted as well while we've got this session going on, that would be very useful. Okay, so for this session, our first session, we've got a couple of objectives, or three actually. First of all, we're going to have a little chat about how we use Zoom on this session. We're 2 years into a pandemic, so people are much more used to using Zoom than they were when we started this, but nonetheless, it's probably worth us just talking briefly about that. Then we're going to have a session, we're going to talk about the key messages that are in the first part of the course, which you should have seen, because hopefully you will have looked at the videos and looked at the pre-reading material that we've given you. But most of this session, we're going to break out into small breakout groups each with a coach, and you can do some practice. So the way this course is structured is very much that most of the learning material is on the website. And the idea is that you use that to get yourself up to speed. These sessions are really about a little bit about reinforcing the main messages of that learning material, but we're not trying to cover everything in the online lectures, but also giving you a chance to practice with other people. You can't just do this course by coming on these sessions. It requires work outside of that. Give us feedback, either during the session via the chat channel or after the session via email. So the agenda for today, a little bit about using the Zoom briefing, where we are on the course, where we are on the test, what the coaches are going to do, and then we can chat. So we're using Zoom. Probably everybody's used it, but if not, I'm just pointing you at a few things. This is a PC screen with Zoom on it. The iPad is not dissimilar, although I think you have to put your finger on it to get some of these menus up. You have to hover over it with a mouse on the PC. The mute button down here, that's pretty important with 200 and something people on the call. Keep that in the big session, keep yourself muted unless you're asked to speak. In the breakouts, you can do it differently because there'll only be half a dozen or so of you. You can look and see who the meeting participants are by clicking on the participant button. The chat window, if you click on that, you'll open a chat window. You can send messages to Chula with questions. We probably won't use the reactions thing very much. And then up on the top right here, we've got a speaker or gallery view. And it's probably best to have a speaker view for this part of the session. In the breakout, you might want to do a gallery view so you can see all the participants. Okay, yeah. We are recording the session. So if you're going to miss a subsequent session, let me know and I'll put you on the list of people to...
On a Zoom, what are you asking me?
Say again?
No.
When we go to the breakout rooms, you might not have used this feature of Zoom. Andrew is working hard at the moment setting up the rooms. And the way we do it is we will allocate people pretty much randomly to the rooms, and we'll put in each room a coach. Then at some point, about 7:30 or about 8 o'clock or thereabouts, I'll press go, and you will get a message saying, hopefully, saying that you've been asked to go to a breakout room, and you'll need to click join. I'm going to stay at the top level, so I'll be here, hopefully with nobody to talk to. But if you need help, you can ask for help, or you can leave the breakout room and come back up to the top level and talk to me by pressing leave breakout room. And then you can go back. I can put you back in the breakout room. So if you've got a problem, please do that. Please remember which breakout room you came from. I won't know. So if you're in breakout room 17 or 18 or 19, that's a really useful piece of information if you want to get back there. We probably won't close the breakout rooms. What we'll do is, after we finish this large session, we'll push you into breakout rooms, and you can stay there as long as you and the coach have the patience to do that. Once you're finished, you're done. Go have a drink or whatever you want to do. We don't try and get everybody back here together at the same time. A little bit about the course. We developed initially with support from an organization called Airspace for All, which is a small group supporting general aviation particularly. And we got a little bit of funding to do some of the initial development of the course. That was quite useful. It's work that Andrew and I did, and that resulted in some of the videos that you've seen. And the initial idea was that it was going to be pretty much standalone. You could just watch the videos, or we'd push it out to clubs, and different clubs could have people teach the course. When we got to it, though, we realized that we had something that we could do online, and that coincided with the first lockdown, the first COVID lockdown. So we ran a course pretty much structured like this one, which we repeated last year, and we're doing for the third time, as I've said. And the basic framework is something like 2-hour sessions to go through the material. And on the back end of each session, coaching. And then when we finish that, we try and allocate groups of students who want to go further and take the test. Not everybody does, that's fine. And give them a coach, and then they can practice to the point where they're ready for the test. And then we help them get that test set up. Last year, we started with a couple of hundred people. I think we ended up with about 100 people taking the test. We got about, I think, 96 people through the practical test, which we were pleased about. That's a substantial number. This year, we've had 240 people who signed up for the course. We've got and about 40 volunteers for coaching. We've got 234 people on this call at the moment. So that's a pretty high proportion. I don't suppose that everybody will end up taking the test, and again, that is fine. Our objective, if you remember, was to help glider pilots to use the radio. That doesn't necessarily require that you do a test. Something like 15% or so of the people on this course have already got a FRTOL. Again, that's fine. We're helping people practice. We're helping people get better. You absolutely need to make good use of the course material. Hopefully you've all found the website. You got pointed out there for the sign up at any rate. On the website, it's a fairly simple structure, but there's a section called course materials, and that has a video for certainly the first 5 parts of the course. It's got some pre-reading, which are the basics of the thing, a video lecture for each part. We have some scripts for the breakouts and practice. So they are written examples of what you might say in different scenarios. And they're actually they're for you to look at when you're trying to understand what to say, but if you can avoid using them during the practices, that is best. They're more for the coaches. And certainly at the later stage, we take those scripts away from you because you need to be able to make this stuff up on your own. We've also got we found a little app called Script Rehearser, which will run on your phone. That's really neat. That's an app that is used by actors to learn lines. So what we can do is we can produce little files which match the script, the paper scripts that I talked about a moment ago. You can put those on your phone, then you can practice on your own. So what happens is the phone will work as air traffic control. It will say something. It will then wait for you to say something back. You press a button, and then you'll get another voice telling you what you should have said, or something like what you should have said. So that lets you go away and practice when you're walking the dog or whatever. So we've got a quite rich set of materials. There are also a set of other videos on the website, some of them by a guy called the Flying Reporter, who has made quite nice videos of trips he's done in his airplane. And that'll give you a really good feel for what real RT sounds like. He's made a number of visits to different types of air traffic control, which are worth a look. So you use that material. Right, the current situation with the FRTOL test. This is changing. It's been changing for 3 years, or 2 years at any rate. We talk about the old style test and the new style test. The old style test, which is the one that most people are still doing, if you go do an RT course somewhere else, you'll be doing, when you do the test, you're going to be pretending to be in a light aeroplane, and you're going to be using something called a RANT simulator, which is probably 20-year-old technology. It was originally a navigation trainer. the CAA are in the process of changing that, and we've had quite a lot of input into that. And so the new style test, you can pretend to be in a glider, which is much better for a glider pilot. And it's more interactive with the examiner rather than using this simulator. Last year, we were able to do this over Zoom because we were in lockdown as we set it up, and they did a pilot using Zoom. But this year, the CAA wants to roll out the new style test, and they haven't got enough time to roll out Zoom as well. So this year, it will hopefully be the new style test with any RT examiner that has been brought up to speed. And we've been promised that they will bring the examiners on this call up to speed first, or at least early. And it'll be face-to-face. There's also a written test, which isn't terribly complicated, but that needs to be done with the RT examiner as well. So that's where we are. It is still in flux. So in a couple of months' time, we will give you more information as to what the current situation is. Our coaches, and this is the absolutely key part of this course, we have 40 or more coaches who have volunteered to give up their time to help you guys. And they are tremendously important. This wouldn't work without them. And so, as I've said, most of each session is going to be coaching using the scripts we've developed. And we will, at the end, link coaches to students who want to do the test to prepare for the test. Right, so here's a reminder. Those coaches who have coached before will know this, and many of them already done it. For those of you who are new, it's really important that you have a star in front of your Zoom name that appears on the screen. Hopefully you've already done it because I've emailed you about it several times. But if you haven't, get that star in, otherwise you won't be coaching a group. And Andrew has a last chance to go around that list. To do it on a PC, you just go to the participants window, click your name, and then use the more and rename function. And that lets you change your name and just put a star in front of it. On a Mac, it's pretty similar. And on an iPad, again, you're doing it but you're touching the picture, touching participants and touching rename. So it's fairly easy. A plea for everyone for this session and all the subsequent ones, please, when you register for the session, use the email address that you registered when you registered for the course. So that will be the email address that you get the emails from me on. The reason for that is we need to keep track of who has been at the sessions, because certainly in the last year, the CA were quite keen that the people who we put forward for test had been on the course. And it saves me an awful lot of manual work if you use the same email throughout. And when you put your name on the Zoom, please use your full name. Again, for the records that we have. Right, so that's how we're doing it. Chula, have we got any questions so far?
The only one I had was if you've done I've had two. If you've done the written exam sometime in the past, does it have a validity period? And I believe it's 2 years. So if it's over 2 years, you'd need to do it again.
I think that's great.
And from, I think it's Nigel Murray, I took his question to mean, is this a full FRTOL at the end of it?
That's a good question.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah, so when Andrew and I first engaged with the CAA to encourage them to set up this glider-specific thing, we did consider whether a FRTOL light of some sort, a lesser FRTOL just for glider pilots, was appropriate. And when we looked at the actual syllabus, our conclusion was actually, no, it wasn't appropriate, because if we wanted a FRTOL where glider pilots could engage with pieces of controlled airspace, for example, then the amount we would leave out if we were doing a light FRTOL was so small as not to be worth it. So we didn't do it. That was probably good, because I don't think the CAA would have accepted the idea anyhow. So we were all on the same page. But this FRTOL is absolutely a full FRTOL. You can go and fly anything with it afterwards. And we do that because although we're pretending to be in a glider, there is a discussion with the examiner where you will talk about some of the things that maybe you don't do when you're in a glider. So the sort of phraseology that involves taxiing and so on. But at least for the simulation bit, you can be in a glider. And we're teaching you how to use it in a glider. Okay, thanks, Chula. Let's move on. So let's talk a bit about the key messages of part one. The ICAO phonetic alphabet. New to some of you, I guess. You just need to know this. If you don't know it, you've got to learn it. And there's practice is the only way. But let's have a look at this slide. And what I want you to do is, in your head, just work down that list and one word at a time, spell it out to yourself phonetically, and I'll go down with you. Okay, so the first one, Tango Hotel Echo. The next one, Quebec Uniform India Charlie Kilo. Oscar November Yankee X-ray. Golf Oscar Bravo Lima India November. Juliet Uniform Mike Papa Sierra. Oscar Victor Echo Romeo. Tango Hotel Echo. Lima Alpha Zulu Yankee. Delta Whiskey Alpha Romeo Foxtrot. Okay, so if you went down that with me without any problem, fantastic, you got it. Otherwise, that's something to take away for next week, because if you're struggling with what you should call letters, that's going to be a problem. Okay, numbers are a bit more tricky because they've got a few extra rules in. And so there are some things where we pronounce each number individually. And that's aircraft call signs, speed, frequencies, headings, wind speeds, and direction. So anytime you're talking about one of those things, you spell out all the numbers. A minor exception to that rule, if you're dealing with a frequency, it's all 6 digits unless the last 2 are zeros. So we'll say 121.5 and not 121.500. And we'll never say 121.500. A different set of things, we'll pronounce each number individually except for whole thousands and hundreds. So that's things to do with height, altitude, flight levels, to do with level, maybe height and cloud height. The pressure setting, runway visibility range information or visibility, slightly different things, but same concept, and transponder codes. So if we've got a pressure setting of 1000, we'll say 1000. If we're squawking 3000, we'll say 3000. There's a special rule here as well, which is if we say climb to, or if air traffic say climb to or descend to, that must be followed by the word altitude or height. So descend to altitude 3,000 feet. And fairly clear why that is if you think about it. It's because otherwise we can confuse two. So if I said descend to 3,000 feet, have I just said 23,000 or did I say 3,000? And like most things in aviation, I think that's a rule that was made in blood. somebody crashed because they got that one wrong. Okay, so have a little think about these. So the first one, how would you pronounce that? So it's a level, but it's not 100 or 1,000. So it's flight level 60. All right. The second one, again, it's a level. That's flight level 100. The next one would be squawk 7,000. The next one would be 150 degrees. QNH 1000, QNH 1013. You get used to them, but quite important you get those right. You should have read this if you've read the pre-reading pack. When is the word hectopascals used following a pressure setting? Have a think if you know the answer. And it's if the pressure setting is less than 1,000 hectopascals. Again, a rule written in blood. And the reason for that is our American cousins use inches of mercury to measure pressure rather than hectopascals. And quite often that starts with a 9, I think. So it's possible for a pressure like 960 to be confused with an inches of mercury reading. So we use the word hectopascals. There's a few gotchas that are worth knowing about, things that people tend to get wrong. So you need to know the difference between Roger, Wilco, and affirm. Okay. Roger means I've received your last transmission. Wilco means yes, I'll do that. And affirm means yes. So they've got quite precise meanings, and we try very hard not to misuse those. And a couple of things, particularly as glider pilots, that are worth remembering. It's the word standby and the word unable. So if you're busy, there's a saying in aviation which is aviate, navigate, and communicate in that order. And it's a good one. It means fly the glider first, worry about where you are and where you're going, and then once you've got those things sorted out, you can talk to people. So you don't want to let talking to air traffic get in the way of those other two things, or certainly not to a point where you get them wrong. So standby is a word you can use to say, I can't talk to you right now, I'll come back to you in a moment. And unable, particularly for a glider pilot, is good, because if somebody asks you to do something and you can't do it, you don't think it's safe, you can say unable, can't do that. They're really good words to know. Right, so you should have done this in the pre-reading. Can you write down the format for an initial call and the full message? I'll just give you a minute to try and do that. Grab a pen and paper, try and do that. If you don't have a pen and paper, think about what that looks like. Okay, So let's have a look at the initial call. It's who we're calling, who we are, and what do we want. So it's the station's name, followed by our call sign, followed by our request. And generally, that request is the service that we want. We'll come to the services in a little while. So if I'm flying my glider, it might be Cambridge approach, glider Golf Charlie Lima Oscar November, request basic service. It's as simple as that. And the full message, because what will happen then is that the air traffic will say, glider Golf Charlie Lima Oscar November, pass your message, which is your invitation to come out with this lot. So it's who we are, where we're from and where we're going to, where we are in 3 dimensions, and then any other detail. We often use where we're tracking to, or what our next turning point is, and what we want if we need something other than what we asked for in the initial message. So in that case, my example would be glider Golf Charlie Lima Oscar November from Gransden Lodge to Gransden Lodge, 2 miles east of Bourne, altitude 3,500 feet, QNH 1018. Next turning point, Bury St Edmunds. So let's see how that sounds. Chula, you up? Chula's going to play air traffic in this case.
Go ahead.
Okay. Cambridge approach, glider Golf Charlie Lima Oscar November, request basic service.
Glider Golf Charlie Lima Oscar November, Cambridge approach, pass your message.
Glider Golf Charlie Lima Oscar November from Gransden Lodge to Gransden Lodge, 2 miles east of Bourne, altitude 3,500 feet, QNH 1018. Next turning point, Bury St Edmunds.
Glider Oscar November, QNH now 1017, basic service.
1017, basic service, glider Oscar November. And that is it. And that is the structure of most engagements with air traffic, with some little wrinkles on. And if you can get that ingrained in yourself, you will go find the rest of the thing really quite easy. We're going to be practicing this thing today. And after that, actually, a lot of what you have to do is understanding who you're talking to, what they're capable of doing, and engaging with them based on that information. Okay. So I've got a few questions that have come up on previous sessions. So let's deal with those. So the first one we tend to get asked is, so how do you address the launch point at a small club? And actually, I generally just call it launch point. So at Cambridge, I might say Gransden launch point, glider Oscar November. The launch point is not providing an air traffic service. We're just using the thing for local communication. Which brings us to the second question, which is, do you need a FRTOL at a gliding airfield with a discrete frequency? For example, HusBoz, I think, use 127.580. We use 131.280 at Gransden. And the answer is no, you don't need a FRTOL for that. What you need a FRTOL for is to talk to what's called an air traffic service unit. So that's somewhere with an air traffic controller or an advisory flight information service officer, or a air ground communications operator. One of those people is an air traffic service unit, and to talk to them, you have to have a FRTOL. But not for a gliding airfield, not to talk to another glider, because they're not air traffic service units. Okay, third common question, does a FRTOL meet the needs of a glider pilot rather than a power pilot? And yeah, it does, I think. Certainly those of us with them find them very useful. should we include what we're squawking in the initial message? And for those of you who don't know, a squawk is a transponder code. So an increasing number of gliders these days, and we'll talk about it later on in the course, an increasing number of gliders have a transponder. And if we've got a transponder, we set a 4-digit code on that transponder, and that code, possibly with our call sign, appears on the radar controller's console, so they know who we are. And when we call them, if we want, we can tell them what number we have set in our little box. And it can be useful. If you want to get a radar service out of an air traffic unit, then yes. And then this is quite a big one. Can we use glider plus competition number or glider plus trigraph rather than the standard G-reg as our call signs? And if you listen to a radio as you're flying around the country, you'll actually find most gliders using their glider plus either their comp number or their trigraph. So in my case, my glider is 28, my comp number is 28, and I almost always use glider 28 as my call sign. Strictly, that's not legal, and that's the last time we're going to do it on this course. And the reason for that is that strictly you ought to use the full G-reg. And because we're pushing you, we try to teach you towards a license, that is what we're going to do on this course. So we're going to use the glider Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta as our call sign for the rest of the course. Chula, have we got any questions that have come up on chat so far?
Yes, a few.
Okay.
So Tim says, is heard Foxtrot abbreviated to Fox? Is that acceptable? Answer no. Neil McGovern, thanks. Runway numbers need to be enunciated individually. So runway 1, 2. Neil, I think sorry, go ahead, Paul.
So yeah, on the first thing, the phonetic alphabet used to be Fox. It isn't anymore. And as Chula says, you need to use the current one, not the old one. Neil's point about runway numbers, absolutely right. Yeah.
Neil, you had something to say about headings. I think it was part of something that Paul was saying. I wasn't quite sure. If you want to unmute and just deal with it.
No, it's basically technically runway numbers are kind of covered by because they are headings.
I see.
You just need to make sure that they are same, which also includes like it's not runway 5, it's 05.
Oh, sorry, I thought you had a separate point. I beg your pardon.
Yeah. So headings, if you remember, we said we would enunciate all the numbers in a heading. So it's going to be 150, not 150, and it would be 100, not 100. And a runway is always 2 digits, and it's the 2 digits. So as Neil's just said, runway 22 will be runway 22, but we don't, unlike the Americans who would say runway 5, we will say runway 05, always. It's always 2 digits. It's a good point, Neil, thanks. Maybe we should put that in the slide. Chula?
Graham Baker, thanks. Transponder codes are said individually, so 2501. I have a horrible feeling if it was something odd like 3000, that might be 3000.
So 1,000, yes. Transponder codes are individually unless they're thousands.
Yep. This one, I know we've covered it more than once, but it does keep coming up. So yes, this is a full FRTOL. You can use it for your PPL, for your Airbus, whatever you like, as long as it's VHF. James asks, how do you know if it's approach or radar or tower or some such? We'll get there in stages through this course. My simple practical answer is tune to the frequency first and listen, and you will soon learn, because other people will get it right, and anyway the controller will come back with it correct. So
yeah, if I can just leap in there are some places where you ought to know because that's what they are, and you're calling that frequency, but other places where they might be one thing or they might be another. Cambridge, for example, if they have a working radar controller, they will be Cambridge radar, otherwise they'll be Cambridge approach. I tend to call Cambridge, and they will come back and tell me which they are.
Yeah.
And if I haven't heard anybody on frequency, if I've heard somebody on frequency, I'll have already heard it. So. Yeah. Sure. Next.
Paul, you were sorry, Paul, had you finished? Beg your pardon.
Yeah.
You were talking about if you were told to climb to altitude 3,000 feet, then it's important to say altitude 3,000 feet. In the full message, and Nick's pointed this out, when you're giving your three-dimensional position, you're typically going to be saying 2,500 feet QNH 1034. I don't think there's a requirement to say altitude at that point. If it's
that's an interesting one. I think you're right, but it doesn't hurt. I think I've heard some examiners want it.
Right. Okay. And as you say, it doesn't hurt, and it's probably not worth turning into debate, is it?
No.
Does Hans says, does it work when the transponder sends you G registration? I'm going to say, don't worry about that. Just use the standard formats that Paul's been talking about. Comp numbers you've talked about. What about Annex 2? You're going to have to make that question, spell that one out to me, unless my colleagues straight away know what you're talking about there.
Yeah, I can deal with that.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. If you don't have a G-reg because you're on Annex 2, you'll have to use a trigraph. So that's straightforward. Mode S, which is where the controllers know your registration. It's just a help to them. It doesn't change the radio at all.
Yeah. And last one I've got from Jamie says, would this be valid outside the UK? So presumably that was referring to the FRTOL. Well, it goes on to your license. So yes.
Yes, exactly. It's a purely UK thing as it happens. Other countries don't have FRTOLs. It's not an international qualification, but it's one that you need in this country.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, is that it, Chilla?
I think so. Apologies if I've missed any.
I've got a few that came my way, which I can now look at. Do you say glider Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta or just glider Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta? Says John Lambie. And the answer is the first, glider Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, but subsequently we shorten it to glider Charlie Delta. We drop the whole of the rest of it. Paul Knight points out that Squawk 7000 is now called Squawk Conspicuity. Absolutely correct. Daniel says, having an EASA SPL and an EASA CPL, will it be possible to hold a FRTOL from the UK CAA? The answer is yes, albeit probably not on your license. You'd have to hold it as a separate thing. Mark Millard asks, is it wise to write down information to repeat back, for example, on an e-pad? Interesting one. I've never had room for an e-pad in a glider. So I tend to do my RT in ways that I don't have to remember too much to repeat back. James asked, if I don't have a license, I'm pre-bronze, can you still take the exam? Absolutely. Yeah, you can. If you don't have a license to put the FRTOL onto, you can get a standalone license, or you can wait up to a couple of years to apply for it, to include it in your license. So if you do the test, it's valid for 2 years. But anyway, you can get a standalone. Dominic asks, in the past, gliders would announce open class glider or standard class glider. Yeah, we've sort of dropped that. Richard Peake says, I thought you could only shorten your call sign once the service controller has. Is that correct? And it is. Yeah, we'll come to that. Okay, yeah. All right, good. Thank you, guys.
There's just one more, which is, will I get picked up for pronouncing the headings wrongways incorrectly? Sort of the wrong, if you don't follow the pronunciation guide. I mean, the short answer is yes, you may, but kind of the broader answer is lots of these things seem pedantic, but probably every single rule here is a result of some accident or another. So I would say aim for perfection.
Yeah,
I would, wouldn't I?
If you're up in the air and you get something minor wrong, nobody's going to worry,
No.
providing you're clear. If you're going to, but get it right, because as Chula says, there were reasons for it. If you're doing an RT exam, you'll get away with a few, but if they're all over the place, the examiner might conclude that you haven't actually done the work. So. It's not a perfection, but it's Absolutely do your best. Right. Well, let's move on. Andrew, how are we set up on the breakouts?
Oh, this is a full-time job.
I know.
Yeah,
Fun, isn't it?
yeah, I think we're there.
Okay.
I don't think I'm assigned to any groups. So what may happen is you may do the breakouts and then 6 random people may get plucked out of whichever rooms they went into and end up with me. Bad luck. But yeah,
Okay.
I think we're there.
All right, excellent. Let me brief you then as to what we're going to do next. So what we want you to do, we're going to put you in breakouts. You're flying your glider or a glider from your club. You can pick the call sign on a cross country. I want you to pick a nearby airfield that you might pass. Decide on a height and position that you might, where you might be when you make a call to get a basic service. So the student's going to act as the glider pilot, the coach is air traffic, the glider pilot makes an initial call, air traffic controller responds, the glider pilot makes the full call, and the air traffic controller can respond to that. In your group, you can take it in turns. There is a breakout script, which you hopefully have seen, which you can use as a template, but if you can, do without that. Just get that structure of that call in your head, okay? And practice it between now and next week, because next week we're going to move on relatively quickly and there's going to be lots to do. So we've had reasonable questions, I think. I think it's probably a good time to move on. If you want to send me questions by chat, I'll respond, or send me an email afterwards and we can review those emails next week. For next time, there's a lot of course materials for part 2. We get stuck into an actual glider flight. Be very good at doing the initial and full calls and go through the pre-reading again. The stuff in that is both useful and necessary. You need to know it and you'll need to know it for the test. So do the work before you come next time. Right. Let me stop screen sharing.